It's obvious there's a lot of confusion as to what the exact law is on how much you can drink before you can drive. Let's turn to a drink driving solicitor, if I can use that shorthand term, because Matthew, you represent people for all sorts of motoring offences, but drink driving is one of them. Let me put you on the hot spot. Let me say, if Luke, the former professional footballer, had come to you and said, I want you to represent me after this accident, how would you have taken him through it, and what would you have said to him?
I don't think there is anything that you can say to him. He's already aware of how much pain that he's caused to the family of those two little boys, and I don't think there's anything that a solicitor could say that to make him realise that. But certainly, where there has been a fatality, the only advice would be that it would have to be that he pleads guilty at the earliest available opportunity.
So you'd say that, but you wouldn't look for any sort of technicalities, any problems with the road, any, a full stop left out of the charge sheet or whatever?
It's not so much the full stop left out of the charge sheet, Mike. What we look for is departures from the statutory procedures in terms of the taking of the samples, because the law has set out the set way that this should be done, and in certain circumstances we find that there have been departures from the procedure. There are certain things that the police have to do. They don't have unlimited powers. There are certain things that the police have to do in order to ensure that samples are admissible as evidence.
But you're looking for a loophole, what you're saying?
I certainly wouldn't be looking for a loophole in a case involving those two little boys. I can assure you of that. There may be other lawyers that would.
But okay, if it was me on a drink driving charge, and let's say nobody's been actually hurt, but I've been stopped, I've been pulled up, I've gone across the curb or something like that, they've seen me, I want to, I want to get off, to be honest. I don't want to lose my licence. Are you going to look for a loophole? And what sort of loophole would you be looking for in that?
My duty as a solicitor is to go through the evidence, if I'm instructed to do so by my clients, to see if there is a potential defence. And I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't do that. And as I say, the law is the law. The law says that the police must, for example, always give a warning of prosecution prior to asking for a breath sample. And if that warning it hasn't been given, then the sample isn't admissible at law, and I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't flag up those sorts of issues.
But obviously you appreciate the police have got a very difficult job. Take a case, in Amanda's case, where everything must be happening all at once. It's a terrible tragedy. Somebody's bound to, or is likely to, make a mistake, and then obviously the lawyers are trying to exploit that.
Well, I'd say in the more serious cases, it's even more important for the police to ensure that those procedures are correctly followed. We've
just seen the film there. Do you think that people know enough about the law? Is there enough education? Do we all know what the limit is, how much we can drink? We're going to talk in a minute about the morning after, for instance. Do you feel that there's enough education?
I don't think people do, no. I agree there should be more education. I don't think people are aware of how much alcohol they'd have to consume in order to be over the limit. And the difficulty is that, as already been alluded to, everyone's tolerance level is different.
I mentioned the morning after. If I could talk to Mel. Now, obviously, there's a problem here because you're still inebriated the morning after, or you still have got a certain amount in your system.
Yep. You're quite right, Mike, and people do not appreciate the amount of alcohol that can still be in the system the following morning. They go to bed, they have a sleep, they get up in the morning, have a little bit of breakfast, and they may feel okay, but they're still way over the limit. For example, we know this for a fact, that the morning after is a huge, huge problem. A couple of years ago, we looked at 4,000 of motorists that particular year we'd put through one of our courses, and we're doing over 10,000 a year at the present time. We looked at 4,000.
10,000 courses for drunk drivers.
10,000 people.
That's people, yes.
Over 10,000 motorists per year. That's just us.
And you're not the only company doing it?
We're not the only company doing it.
For drink driving?
For drink driving.
They've all been caught?
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
I was going to say it's a sobering thought.
It's over 10,000.
That's ridiculous.
And we looked at 4,000 a couple of years ago, and of those 4,000, the ones who were the morning after, to coin a phrase, 18.7% of those 4,000. So it's nearly 20%.
But does rehabilitation work? I mean, if we just had a ban, maybe a life ban, if it was a really serious situation, does rehabilitation work? Is
it is working nationally, and those are the only figures I can quote. Nationally, it's the reconvictions that are going down, because once they had this education, once they've been given the information, then they are far, far less likely to commit a further offence, because nationally the reconvictions have gone down by somewhere in the region of 54%, which has got to be good in anybody's language.
Okay, so
but it's it's where you commit the first time. There is insufficient government, no matter what colour the government is, there's insufficient information being pushed out to the motorist about units.
And what about the pubs and the brewers? Shouldn't they be putting some money into all this?
Well, we do. I mean, 1/3 of everything that turns over at a pub goes to the Treasury, so there's plenty of money going to the government from the pubs. I think just talking about we probably wouldn't all agree about the punishment for drink drivers, but it is actually quite harsh. I mean, if drink driving was penalised by an £80 fixed penalty, there'd be a lot more drink driving going on in this country. There's no question about that. The punishments is harsh, and there's also non-legislative punishments as well, such as, for example, losing a job because you rely on your car to drive. You lose your job, and if you lose your job, you could well lose your home and subsequently your family.
Perhaps you don't think about this if we were all round a table in the pub having a great night. Perhaps you don't think about that.
Well, people should think about it. I mean, you know, there's clearly on that VT, there was an awful lot of irresponsible quotes coming from some of those individuals. And Mel is right. I mean, there does clearly need to be some more training. I think we shouldn't be doing it really around units, because the problem with doing it around units is then people make a calculation. I'm against intoximeters or whatever they're called, you know, for testing yourself to see if you're fit to drive. If you've reached that stage, you shouldn't be getting in the car. No question about that at all. If I can just say, one of the biggest issues is the likelihood of being caught. And there's a very interesting statistic. If you were in France, 63% of all French drivers will have been breathalyzed in the last 3 years. In Holland, that goes up to 64%. In Britain, it's 9%.
Well, I'm right in saying that we don't just have random breath tests, do we?
No, we don't.
Those are not
You
legal.
have to have a reason to
That
pull
is-
you
that
over.
is-
to
that
give
is-
you a
I have to
breath
correct
test.
you there. They don't have to have a reason
To
to
pull
pull
you
you over.
over.
No.
But they do have to have a reasonable suspicion in order to breathalyse you.
We would like to
There are
see
three
standard
reasons
testing.
for a breath test. You've been involved in a road traffic accident, you committed what's called a moving traffic offence, or the police suspect you of having alcohol in the system. And just a simple, what's called a stop check.
Yes.
Just to see whether, because the police can do that with anybody,
Yes.
if they're driving down the road, they can stop the driver just to check whether they and the vehicle are complying with legislation. And it's when that conversation starts,
You can smell the alcohol.
suspicion of alcohol because it's on the breath.
And what about the statistics on the continent? If you're saying that, let's call them random tests, are much more prevalent in
Well, they have different sanctions as well. Some of them are quite light, and they also have varying degrees of sanctions. In other words, if you're a bit over the limit, you have a light fine, and if you're a bit more, you have a slightly heavier fine. I don't think we'd like to see that in this country.
Perhaps the answer is to do away with mandatory disqualification for those people who are caught between 50 and 80, but still make it against the law.
Or have
that may well be
disqualification of 3 or 6 months, Matthew.
Yes, or shorter, because at the
Then
moment we have
then
those-
lawyer
but
to
then keep the
argue your
12.
case.
Keep the 12 months for over 80.
Yes, in my experience, most of our clients are significantly over the limit anyway. And lowering the legal limit is not going to deter those sorts of people.
But then they'll know that they shouldn't be getting. See, the law
Well, they
says
already know
upsy
it, but they do
daisy
it.
that they
Yeah.
Would it
shouldn't
be
get
fair
in the
to
car.
say that if I'm a soap star and I get done for drink driving tonight, and I've got quite a bit of money, I've got a better chance of perhaps escaping a ban than Joe Soap from the back
Yeah,
streets
you
of
will.
Salford?
Yeah, you will.
You're saying-
you will. The
Yeah?
footballers
Let's
do it
ask a
as
lawyer
well.
on this one.
They do, because
If I'm
they've got more
prepared to
money.
pay a high-powered lawyer to get to at least find a technicality, I've got a better chance of getting off, haven't I?
The better your lawyer, the better your chance that you've got. Yes, and I have to agree with that.
So that's true. So there's not really a consistency in this sort of
There's
thing.
no, there isn't. If you're a footballer or you're a star, they'd find some way of getting you off. If you're just an everyday Joe Blog, you'll get the sentence that you deserve.
What was your attitude to drink driving before this terrible tragedy happened to your family,
Did
you ever think about it?
No, I didn't. I didn't really think about it because, as I said, I worked in a bar, so I didn't drink and drive myself because obviously I worked in it 90% of the time. By the time you finish a shift, you'd want to just get home and get to your bed. You don't want to drink. Plenty of times I've taken a key off somebody, or I have picked up the phone because I've seen them walking into the car park and said, look, this is the registration number, this is the person, his name's like that, he's been in here, or she's been in here for 5-6 hours, she's the way over, they can hardly walk and they're about to get in the car. But you can't do that with every customer, and landlords, landladies, the barmen, bar women, you can't expect them to do that all the time. It is the individual that is responsible for your own actions. You are responsible for your own actions. So if you're stupid enough to get in your car, then you should be held responsible for the actions that you've just caused.
Can I pick up on one point?
Yes, indeed.
On the clip, Mike, one guy said he was aware that the body gets rid of the alcohol at rate of 1 unit per hour. That's fine, and yes, if everything's working as it should be, because what we're told by the medical profession is, and they're looking at the average, say the average male, 28 years of age, 5'10", about 10.5 stone, good healthy lifestyle, good healthy diet, and a good healthy working liver. But there aren't many of those animals around, are there really?
No, you're certainly not looking at one at the moment.
But on top of all this, that's fine, providing we don't have any obstruction in here. And this is one of the biggest myths surrounding alcohol, and that is food. You hear so many times people saying, I'll be okay because I've had a big meal. It will soak it up. It slows down the elimination out of the body. So you can forget your 1 unit an hour.
Right. Let me just go around the table then as to the solution to this. I'm sure you haven't got the absolute answer, but certainly if I had to ask you, put you on the spot, and I'll start with you, Mel, very, very quickly, how would you cut the rate of drink driving?
I think it's important that down 1 or 2 different avenues, really. Get more information, important, vital, pretty basic information out to the motorists on a regular basis.
How about starting younger as well, about in schools, for instance?
Well, that sort of information, yes, if we can get into these places. I mean, I personally have been into sixth form colleges, but I find talking to motorists, either with a full licence or certainly with a provisional licence. So that's why we think probably the 15-year-old stage before they're able to get a licence, because A, they're our future drivers, B, to let them know what they're doing to themselves physically, to the body, with drinking the amounts of alcohol that they're drinking.
I'm going to turn to Matthew. Bigger penalties, more education, what do you think?
Well, certainly more education, and I would consider lowering the legal limit, but also bringing in a power of discretionary disqualification and penalty points for those people who are slightly below the current limit, but nonetheless over 50 milligrams in blood.
And from behind the bar, Lee Clerk?
Education, certainly. Random testing, much more random testing. Let's get out there, let's get the police out there on the roads and stopping these people and checking them.
And Amanda is the only person who's been directly involved in a tragedy like this. What do you think?
Lower the limit, more education. People do need it. And as the random testing, because I've done things with the police as well, they don't have enough sources to do random testing. So maybe they could have just one officer with a normal person, everyday person, or get some of these PCOs, let them have a little bit more authority to pull somebody over and say, come on, you know, we're testing you for drink driving. Give some of the PCOs a little bit more. They've got plenty of them out there. There's plenty of them, but no authority to do anything because they can't even arrest somebody. They have to get another officer in. Let them do a little bit more.
And the cost to the country must run into millions for every accident. Even your accident, as you know, on the M6,
it would cost them thousands,
hundreds of thousands. Of course it did,
because they closed that road off. I think they closed that road, their motorway off the whole day, and then obviously they had to close it off again when they had to do the reconstruction. So it's a lot of money, and you know, then you got the ambulances and the fire brigade and everybody else.
Because the clip that we show them on a course, one of many clips that we have, and it's James Bowen from the BBC, it's a BBC educational film, and that particular year they were looking at, these were NHS figures, 6 billion out of the NHS budget for these sorts of alcohol-related issues. The costings were horrendous.
But from your point of view, on the other side of the bar, if you like, the clerk, obviously Amanda would like to see a zero limit. It's not going to do your members any good, is it?
No, it wouldn't, but I get back to my original point. We're not convinced that a lowering of the limit is going to target the real culprits, the culprits that we've spoken about, those that are drinking now and completely ignoring drink drive laws and are going out there and getting drunk and getting in cars. They're the people we've got to tackle.
If I could just ask you this one, Amanda, how would you like your two children to be remembered? Because you are now an anti-drink drive campaigner. Is this your way of perpetuating their memory, really, and making sure they didn't die in vain?
Yeah, Luke McCormick got banned for 4 years. Bear in mind, he's got a sentence. He'd be eligible for parole in 3.5, but his ban started the day he went into prison. Now, it shouldn't be like that. It should start the day they leave prison and have the 4-year ban. I'm not too sure if that
hasn't changed yet. It is being, I understand it is being looked at.
It should
but at the
be
present
like
time, your disqualification starts at the day of sentence.
Because how much driving they're going to do in prison? Unless they're miracle workers and they get a car and start driving around in a prison cell. But, you know, they can't do that. It should be the ban from the day they leave the prison. Because they've got to learn that they can't do this. Fair enough, they've been in prison, but who's to say the day they come out that they're not going to get in the car and do it again?
And presumably you're going to carry on your anti-drink driving work now.
Yes, of course I will.
Well, we're going to wish you all the best for the future in that work. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. For now, I'd like to thank all my guests, Mel Hughes, Matthew Miller, Amanda Peake and Leila Clerk. And so we've seen Amanda's story and know the potential damage that can be done. So remember, the only way you're going to know you're not over the limit is by not drinking at all.